I used to joke that my little patch of land was the one place in the world nobody could tell me what to do. And for 15 years, that joke was true. I'm not talking about a cute backyard with a swing set. I'm talking about 12 acres of scrub oak and wild grass out past a town most people only slow down for. No streetlights, no sidewalks, no community guidelines taped to my mailbox. Just a narrow gravel drive, a gate with my own lock on it, and a house I built into a life that finally fit me. I'm Rowan Hale. I'm 42. I restore old furniture for a living, the kind with real wood and real stories, because I like fixing things that other people wrote off. And I liked my land for the same reason. It was mine, it was quiet, and nobody could improve it without my say-so. Then one Tuesday morning, I looked out my kitchen window with a mug of coffee in my hand and thought, that's weird. There were little neon flags in my field, bright pink and orange, stuck in the ground like some kind of twisted birthday party. They weren't there the day before. I knew that like I know where every squeaky floorboard in my house is. So I set my mug down, stepped outside in my boots, and walked out toward the flags, thinking maybe a hunter got turned around. Maybe the county was marking something. Maybe I was about to find a lost dog. I followed those flags like breadcrumbs, and my stomach started to drop with every step because they weren't random. They were in a line that led to a fresh scar in the earth. A trench, right through my meadow. Not shallow either. A real cut, 3 feet wide, deep enough you could lose a child in it, with a bright blue conduit snaking along the bottom like something that belonged under a highway, not on my land. There was a mini excavator parked off to the side, tracks sunk into my soil, and a big spool of cable sitting there like it had been dropped from the sky. And stuck in the dirt, right where the trench crossed my favorite walking path, was a sign on a metal stake. Community Infrastructure Upgrade. Authorized Work Area. Under that, a logo. Not the county. Not the utility company. The Meadow Ridge Estates HOA. I actually laughed for a second because it was so stupid it didn't feel real. Meadow Ridge Estates was the neighborhood 10 minutes down the road, all matching mailboxes and rules about what color your curtains could be. When I bought my place, my realtor practically sang the word "No HOA" like it was a hymn. I paid extra for that freedom. I checked the deed. Twice. I remember saying, out loud, I don't want anyone telling me where to park my own truck. And now I'm standing there staring at a trench like somebody took a knife to my property and left a sign like they were doing me a favor. I went back inside, took a photo, then another, then a video, because my brain shifted into that cold, practical gear it does when something feels off. Then I called the number on the sign. A woman answered like I'd interrupted her lunch. Meadow Ridge HOA office. I said, "Hi, my name is Rowan Hale, and someone is digging on my land. I need to know who authorized that." She sighed into the phone, the way people sigh when they're about to make you feel small. Address. I gave it. I could hear a keyboard clacking. Then she said, "Oh yeah, that's part of the corridor project. We're updating service lines for safety and future growth." I said, "My property is not in your association." She replied, "According to our records, it is." I actually stopped walking in my own kitchen and just stared at the wall. "No," I said, "it's not. And nobody asked me." She said, "We have your authorization on file." That's when I felt heat climb up my neck. "You do not," I said. "I didn't sign anything." A pause. Then, like she was reading from a script, "If you'd like to dispute it, you can speak to our board president, Mr. Cal Wexler." She transferred me. I sat on hold listening to a cheerful jingle that sounded like it belonged in a dentist office. Then the line went dead. Click. That was the moment something in me snapped into clarity. This wasn't a mistake. This was somebody betting I'd be confused long enough for them to finish. I got in my truck and drove into town. Meadow Ridge HOA isn't some fancy building. It's a beige office wedge between a vape shop and a tax preparer, like a little kingdom built on paperwork. I walked in with dirt still on my boots and said, "I need to speak to Cal Wexler." The receptionist looked me up and down like I was a stray dog that wandered into a boutique. "Do you have an appointment?" I said, "No, but I do have a trench on my land, so we can pretend this is an emergency." She made a face, picked up the phone, and 5 minutes later a man came out wearing a polo shirt tucked into khakis like he was auditioning for a friendly guy at the bank. He smiled big. "Ms. Hale, right? Cal Wexler. What can I do for you?" I didn't sit. I didn't smile. I said, You're digging on my property." He clasped his hands, like he was about to explain a simple concept to a child. "We're installing an upgraded line through the area for community reliability." I said, "My land isn't your community." He blinked once, just once, then kept smiling. "Our district expanded a while back. It includes adjacent parcels for shared infrastructure." I said, "No, it doesn't. And even if it did, you can't dig on private land without permission." He tilted his head. "We have your permission. Your signature was recorded." That's when I realized he wasn't going to admit anything, not in that room, not to my face. So I said, "Show me." He didn't. He just said, "Our records are internal. If you'd like to challenge them, you can do it through the proper channels." The way he said proper channels made my hands curl into fists. I leaned forward and said, "If your people come back onto my land, I'm calling the sheriff." His smile tightened. "Be careful, Ms. Hale. Interfering with an authorized project can have consequences." He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. He just let the threat sit there, neat and quiet, like a paperweight. I walked out before I did something that would end up on a courtroom projector screen. On the drive home, I kept thinking, how do you expand into someone else's property without them knowing? How do you record my signature without me signing? And why did he sound so confident? When I got back, I walked the trench again. That's when I saw it. A white envelope half buried under loose dirt near one of the flags, like somebody dropped it and forgot. It had the HOA logo, my name on it. Inside was a right of entry agreement, with a signature at the bottom that looked like it was written by a bored teenager trying to copy cursive off a chalkboard. Not even close to mine. It was sloppy. And the date on it? 2 years ago. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat at my dining table with my deed spread out, my phone full of photos, and that forged paper in front of me. It felt surreal, like someone had walked into my house and moved my furniture while I was at the grocery store. I called a lawyer the next morning, Tessa Grant, a real estate attorney I'd hired once when a neighbor tried to claim part of my fence line. Tessa doesn't do dramatic. Tessa does results. She listened, quiet, then said, "Rowan, if they recorded something with a forged signature, that's not just HOA nonsense. That's fraud." She told me to document everything, not touch their equipment, and she'd file for an emergency restraining order to stop the work. While she worked, I did what any stubborn, sleep-deprived person with land does. I secured my gate like Fort Knox. Heavy chain, 2 padlocks, a fresh, no trespassing sign. I figured at least they'd have to think twice before rolling in again. The next morning, I heard engines. Low, heavy, like a truck crawling up a driveway. I looked out and saw 3 work trucks idling outside my gate. Men in reflective vests stood there like they owned the place. One walked up and rattled my chain. I stepped out with my phone recording and said, "This is private property. You need to leave." He looked at me like I was the inconvenience. "We're here to continue the corridor install. You need to open the gate." I said, "No." He held up a clipboard. "We have authorization." I said, "That authorization is forged." He shrugged. "Ma'am, I'm just following orders." Then, and I swear I'm not exaggerating, one of the trucks eased forward like they were considering pushing the gate. My heart started pounding, but my voice came out steady. "If you hit that gate, you're paying for it, and you're doing it on camera." The driver stopped. The clipboard guy stared at me for a long moment, then said, "We'll be back." And they left. Dust hung in the air like a warning. Tessa filed the emergency motion that afternoon. But the thing about people like Cal Wexler is they don't back down when you tell them no, they just change the angle. 2 days later, I got a letter taped to my gate claiming my workshop was in violation of zoning codes. Funny, because my workshop had been there 12 years and passed every inspection that mattered. It was retaliation, plain and simple. Then a second letter arrived, this time from a law firm, demanding $60,000 for delays and interference with the project. 60 grand. For the crime of not letting strangers dig up my land. I called Tessa, and she actually laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was so predictable it was almost pathetic. "They're pressuring you," she said. "They want you scared. They want you broke. Don't respond directly. Let me handle it." That night, bright lights flickered out by the trench. I looked out and saw equipment set up like they planned to work after dark. Not just workers, SUVs, too. Like a little entourage. And that's when I saw something that made my stomach twist. The conduit they'd laid wasn't what you'd use for a normal neighborhood utility line. It was thicker, reinforced, with metal casing. It looked industrial. I'm not an engineer, but I've lived long enough to know the difference between fixing a gas line and building something bigger than they're admitting. The next morning, while they were gone, I walked the trench with a flashlight. I crouched down, brushed dirt off the casing, and found a panel with bolts. I didn't open it. I'm not stupid, but I could see enough through a seam to notice bundled wiring running alongside the main line. Wires, not just pipe. That's when the whole story shifted in my head from HOA overreach to what are you really doing? I sent Tessa my photos. 10 minutes later, she called me and said, "Rowan, I just pulled something from public filings. The HOAs received payments from a company called Blackridge Development." I said, "Never heard of them." Tessa said, "They buy easements for large-scale infrastructure, data corridors, utility right-of-way. Sometimes they use local organizations to smooth it over." And suddenly the trench in my meadow wasn't just a trench. It was a line on a map, a shortcut through the one property owner they assumed wouldn't fight. They assumed wrong. The emergency hearing happened fast. Too fast for me to fully process, honestly. One day, I'm in muddy boots yelling at a clipboard guy. The next, I'm in a courthouse with fluorescent lighting that makes everyone look tired. Cal Wexler sat there with two attorneys, like he was the victim. A woman I'd never seen before sat behind him. Sharp haircut, clipboard, eyes like she'd been trained not to blink. Tessa walked in with a folder thick enough to qualify as a weapon. She leaned toward me and whispered, "Stay calm. Let them talk themselves into a corner." The judge listened while Tessa laid it out. My deed showing no HOA membership, the forged right of entry agreement, the timing of the supposed district expansion, the photos of ongoing work even after notice, the retaliation letters. Then she introduced the payments from Blackridge, and you could feel the air in the room change. Cal's attorney tried to spin it. Community partnership, future-proofing, public benefit. The judge asked, "Is this a gas line project?" Cal's attorney said, "It's an infrastructure upgrade." The judge looked at my photos, then looked back at them. "Why is there armored conduit and bundled wiring on a residential gas upgrade?" Silence. The sharp-haired woman shifted in her seat. Tessa didn't pounce right away. She let them stew for a breath, then said, "Your Honor, they're calling it safety because it sounds noble. But the money trail says profit." Cal finally spoke, and his voice wasn't friendly bank guy anymore. It was clipped, irritated. "Ms. Hale is obstructing necessary progress." The judge turned to me and asked, "Ms. Hale, did you sign any of these documents?" I said, "No, sir." And whoever didn't even try to make it convincing. A couple people in the courtroom snorted, which I didn't expect, and it gave me this weird little burst of courage. I told the judge about the trench, the threats, the trucks at my gate, the bogus zoning notice. I didn't overact. I didn't need to. My voice shook a little anyway, not because I was scared of them, but because it's a sick feeling realizing how easily someone will treat your life like a piece on a board. The judge leaned back, steepled his fingers, and said the words I'd been dreaming about. "Temporary restraining order granted. All work stops immediately. No entry onto my property." He also ordered the matter referred for investigation because forged filings and fraudulent recording weren't civil misunderstandings. Cal's face went pale, then stiff, like he was trying to keep it from cracking. He stood up too fast, gathered his papers, and walked out without looking at me. Outside the courthouse, I finally exhaled. Tessa gave me a small smile and said, "You did exactly what you were supposed to do." I thought I'd feel triumphant, like in movies. Instead, I felt tired, like I'd been carrying something heavy and finally set it down, but my arms were still shaking. The trench was still there. The soil was still torn up. And I knew, deep down, a restraining order doesn't erase the fact that someone decided your boundary lines were optional. Over the next few weeks, the county got involved, then the state. The HOAs suddenly started cooperating. Funny how that works. Contractors came to remove the conduit, refill the trench, reseed the grass. And yeah, the HOA and Blackridge were ordered to cover the cost, but money doesn't fix the feeling of being watched. Every time a vehicle slowed near my gate, my chest tightened. Every time my phone rang from an unknown number, I wondered if it was another threat wrapped in polite language. Here's the part that still messes with my head, and this is where I want you to really think about it. After the work stopped, I started hearing from people. Neighbors I didn't even know I had. Folks who lived on the edge of communities like mine. A guy at the feed store said, "They tried something like that with my cousin. A woman messaged me on social media saying her aunt signed something she didn't understand and lost access to her own driveway. A retired man 2 roads over told me they count on people being embarrassed or confused or too tired to fight. And I realized this wasn't just about an HOA being annoying. This was about a system that sometimes treats regular people like speed bumps. And the most controversial part? A couple months after my hearing, I got a notice in the mail, not from the HOA, not from Blackridge, but from a different company name I didn't recognize, asking to discuss potential easement opportunities. New letterhead, same language. Like the head of the snake got cut off and another one slid in to take its place. Tessa told me, this is why you stay vigilant. These projects don't disappear, they reroute. So yeah, I won. But I'm not naive enough to think it's over forever. I'm just louder now, more careful, and I'm not ashamed to fight. Because the truth is, I used to be the kind of person who'd second-guess herself in a room full of confident men with clipboards and nice watches. I used to think maybe I misunderstood, maybe I missed a letter, maybe I should just be reasonable. And that's exactly what they wanted. They wanted me to doubt my own reality long enough to get what they came for. If you've ever been talked down to, pressured, shoved around by an organization that acts like it's untouchable, you know what I mean. So here's my question for you, and I want you to answer it in the comments because I'm genuinely curious. Where's the line between progress and plain old bullying? If a powerful group decides your rights are inconvenient, is it on you to fight, or on the system to protect you before you have to? And have you ever seen an HOA, a developer, a city project, anybody, try to steamroll someone who didn't have the money or the energy to push back? Drop your story below. Tell me if you think I did the right thing. Tell me what you would have done. And if you've got a neighbor who needs to hear this, share it with them. Because the only reason I'm standing on my land right now is because I refuse to stay quiet.